Light is not the fastest thing in the universe. It never was. That truth has been sitting quietly beneath everything you've ever known, untouched, undisturbed, waiting for the moment someone brave enough or gentle enough might finally listen to it. Tonight, that someone is you. Before we drift into the deeper chambers of this story, allow me one soft request. You are listening to Whispers of the Universe, and if you're kind enough to leave a small gesture, a like, a share, a quiet subscription, it helps this little corner of stillness breathe. Nothing loud, nothing rushed, just a faint touch from you, so this place can stay alive for the nights ahead. Now, let all the noise behind you fade, because what you're about to hear is the secret speed of the universe, and it does not move the way you think it does. The idea that nothing can outrun light has been woven into your mind for as long as you've been alive. Not as a possibility, not as a guideline, but as a law, a boundary drawn by Einstein himself across the fabric of reality. But there is a softer truth behind that boundary, one so strange that even physicists whisper about it instead of declaring it outright. Light is fast, yes, but light is also slow compared to something else, something that doesn't travel. Something that doesn't cross the universe, something that doesn't even acknowledge the existence of distance. Information. It is the real wanderer of the cosmos, and it moves, or rather appears, in ways that break every rule you were told could never be broken. Let me show you. Imagine two particles, born together in the same trembling flash. Twins identical not in shape or color, but in the logic of the universe that binds them. Entangled. Then imagine separating them. One stays near you, the other drifts away, traveling farther and farther, until oceans, planets, and then whole galaxies lie between them. By every ordinary measure, the two particles are now worlds apart. But the universe does not measure the way you do. If you touch one, the other knows. If you speak to one, the other answers. If one changes its state, its twin, no matter how far, changes in the same breath, the same instant, the same unmeasured, indivisible now. No signal travels. No wave leaves one and reaches the other. No messenger carries a message across the desert of space. It just happens. Instantly. Silently. Absolutely. This phenomenon is so unsettling, so violently opposed to common sense, that Einstein himself called it spooky action at a distance. But the universe is not concerned with our discomfort. It simply continues, whispering its truth in places where only the patient can hear. You may wonder, how can something reach across galaxies faster than light if nothing is allowed to travel faster than light? And that is the first secret of this chapter. Nothing is traveling. The universe does not send information across the void. It reveals it everywhere, all at once, as though reality were updating itself in a single breath. Like your thoughts, they do not travel from one side of your mind to the other. They simply appear, whole and immediate, not measured by distance. If the universe can think, and some theories suggest it does, then thought would have no speed. It would simply be. And that is how information behaves. Not like a courier racing through cosmic highways, but like a hidden pulse that awakens simultaneously in far-flung corners of existence. A quiet thread, a trembling signal, a truth without motion. At this moment, somewhere in the deep silence of intergalactic space, countless entangled particles are whispering to each other without crossing the gap between them. Space tries to tell them they are far apart. Light tries to impose a limit. Distance begs to matter. But information ignores them all, because information is not bound to space. It is beneath space. It is older than space. It is the blueprint upon which space is drawn. You and I, we were taught that the universe is a vast stage, a place where objects move, collide, travel, and communicate. But what if the stage itself is the illusion? What if the true theater lies underneath a substrate where everything is already connected, not by bridges of energy, but by unity. A unity too deep for distance to affect? If that is true, and increasing evidence suggests it may be, then there is no speed of information. There is only revelation, a synchronized unfolding of truth. The universe, in this view, is not a giant machine transmitting signals. It is a single structure, updating itself, everywhere, from within, and when you see it that way, the first whisper becomes clear. Light is fast only inside the illusion. Information is fast because it never moves at all. Think of this as a gentle doorway, a threshold leading from the world you know to the world as it truly is. On one side, distances, speeds, limits, a cosmos defined by measurement. On the other side, a realm where separation is not real, where updates happen in a single instant, where the universe is not sending signals, it is remembering itself. You and I are stepping through that doorway now, because in the next chapters, we will discover the mechanisms hidden beneath entanglement, the deeper paradoxes of non-local reality, and why the cosmos seems to think faster than light can run. But before we cross, feel your breath soften. Feel the quiet settling around you like dust in a beam of soft starlight. Let the weight of distance lift from your mind. The universe is not far. Its whispers are always close. And somewhere, beyond the boundary of the visible world, the second chapter is already waiting, like a dim light behind a half-open door, ready to ask you the question that physicists have feared for a century. If information doesn't move, then what, exactly, is motion? Close your eyes just slightly and drift with that thought. We'll step deeper in the next chapter. And as that thought settles, the notion that information never travels, but simply reveals itself, a subtle shift begins to take shape. Because if the universe updates itself without motion, then the very boundary we call the speed of light becomes something else entirely. Not a wall, but a curtain, a thin, shimmering veil drawn across reality, hinting that what we call a limit may only be the limit of what distance means. And in that faint shimmer, the next question emerges, quiet but undeniable, about the true nature of light itself, and why the universe chose to make its velocity the first visible rule written into the fabric of space. A rule we were meant to see, a rule designed to be broken only by the things hidden underneath it. That veil is where the next movement of this story begins, where the limit of light softens, bends, and finally shows the first crack. The veil that softened at the end of the first chapter does not disappear. It stretches forward like a quiet film of air, and beneath it, light begins to show its true shape. Not the gentle radiance your eyes know, but a deeper function, the mechanism that binds space and time into a single breath. For ages, light has been treated as a messenger. It brings us the age of a star, the fall of a galaxy, the trembling birth of a nebula. Everything we see is delivered by its patient hands. And yet, a messenger is only as free as the path laid beneath it. Light is fast, not because it chooses to be, but because the universe carved a ceiling above it, a ceiling woven from the geometry of space-time itself. Einstein revealed that ceiling, but even he sensed the strangeness behind it. Light was not merely swift, it was absolute, a boundary no physical object could surpass, a speed that shaped the rhythm of causality. But boundaries are hints. They exist to suggest that something lies behind them. When physicists measure the speed of light, they are not measuring the strength of photons. They are measuring the structure of reality, the ratio that fuses distance to duration. Light does not sprint across the cosmos. It traces the edges of the simulation we call spacetime. If that structure were drawn differently, C would be different too. It is not the universe's true speed limit. It is the limit of the visible floor, the limit of playing the game from inside the board. Yet that board sits upon something deeper. And this is where the contradiction rises. Because entanglement the silent actor beneath all things, ignores the boundary completely. It does not use distance. It does not cross space. It does not glide through time. And so, the absolute speed of light, so sacred, so perfect, begins to crack under the weight of something older than it. Imagine the universe as a vast fabric stretched under tension. Light races along its threads, never outrunning the pattern it travels through. But information is the pattern. It is the loom itself. And so it never needs to travel. It simply changes everywhere in one indivisible update. This is why the experiments of the past century, from pairs of separated photons in Geneva to cosmic-scale Bell tests using ancient starlight, all point to the same unsettling reality. Light has a speed because space-time has rules. But information does not belong to space-time. It is the script beneath the stage. And once you see that, the questions grow heavier. If light is only fast inside the illusion, then what is light outside it? If its velocity is the maximum pace of space, then what sets the pace for the deeper layer, the one that entanglement seems to pull its answers from? Perhaps the universe chose light's speed not as a limit, but as a clue, a number placed where we could find it. A constant, so precise, so elegant, that humanity would eventually ask, why this number? Why not faster? Why not slower? Why does this value hold the cosmos together? The more you look, the more the answer trembles in place. Because light is not fundamental. It is an interface, a translation layer between our senses and the deeper machinery humming under reality. A threshold bright, sharp, and measurable designed for organisms who evolved to perceive motion, distance, and time. But underneath that threshold, nothing moves the way light does. And some things do not move at all. This is where light's perfection begins to bend, just slightly, revealing the first fracture in the rule we built our worldview upon. A fracture that exposes the next chamber of this story, the one where particles, once linked, respond to each other with no regard for space, where recognition replaces motion, where correlation replaces travel, where reality updates itself as a single, indivisible whole. And it is there, in that silent place between two entangled twins, that the third chapter waits, holding the next truth the universe has been trying to whisper since the beginning. The fracture in light's perfection leads directly into a more unsettling truth, a truth so quiet, so softly disobedient, that even the universe seems to whisper it rather than declare it. Two particles, born from the same trembling moment, do not forget each other. Not after distance, not after time, not after entire galaxies slide between them. Somewhere in the early experiments of the 20th century, this behavior first appeared as a faint anomaly, a kind of cosmic déjà vu written into the smallest pieces of matter. Physicists created pairs of particles, separated them, measured one, and the other responded as if hearing an echo of the measurement across the cosmos. It looked like communication. It felt like communication, but no signal passed. No wave left one particle and arrived at the other. The universe refused to provide a path, and yet the response remained. Einstein pushed it aside, calling it spooky, a word he seldom used, a word chosen precisely because it captured what troubled him most. Something was happening that had no right to happen. Years passed. Experiments refined. Distances increased. The anomalies persisted. Two particles, held in entanglement, behave as though separation is a suggestion, not a fact. If one is measured, the other aligns instantly. If the state of one collapses, the partner collapses in the same breath. No waiting, no traveling, no measurable delay, as if the universe were a single mind, updating two thoughts at once. The deeper you stare into this phenomenon, the more the idea of distance begins to blur. Not because the particles ignore it, but because the particles exist beneath it at a depth where distance has not yet been drawn. Entanglement is not a bridge between 2 points. It is the absence of points. a shared existence stretched thinly across the illusion of space. Imagine two ripples on a single sheet of water. You may point at them and call them separate, but the water does not recognize your distinction. It simply moves as one. So too with entangled particles. They appear to you as two, but to the universe, they are one event. And this is where the first quiet contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. If reality updates both particles simultaneously, then simultaneity must be deeper than time, and unity must be deeper than space. The experiments that confirm this aspect in Paris, Zeilinger in Vienna, teams firing photons across islands, continents, even bouncing them off satellites, all arrived at the same quiet conclusion. The universe does not send messages across distance. It reveals states across a single, undivided structure. Distance is for creatures like us. Separation is for beings who must walk from one place to another. But for the fabric of the cosmos itself, separation is only a pattern, not a truth. And once that truth settles, something shifts. A new question forms, trembling beneath the logic of entanglement. If particles do not tell each other what to become, then what is the thing that updates them both? What field, what structure, what hidden layer of existence holds both particles at once? Whatever it is, it does not care about miles or meters. It does not bend under the weight of light speed. It does not acknowledge position, direction, or travel. It is older than motion, older than distance, older even than the space those particles seem to occupy. And in that ancient stillness lies the next step, a moment where the universe stops pretending that entanglement is a trick and begins to reveal what it truly is. Not communication, not connection, but recognition. A single trembling identity split into two visible forms. And as this recognition sharpens, the path forward begins to open a path that leads to a more dangerous idea the universe has tried to hide behind centuries of equations. If no message travels, then perhaps information is not something that moves through reality at all. Perhaps information is reality, and motion is merely the way our minds interpret its unfolding. That shift, subtle and profound, is where the fourth chapter waits, holding the first real rupture in our understanding of causality itself. The deeper you move into the quiet logic of entanglement, the clearer one unsettling truth becomes. If no message travels between two particles, then the message must have been there all along, and the universe has been pretending otherwise. Physicists once tried to imagine some hidden signal, some invisible pulse darting across the void, faster than anything else. Something that could carry the instruction from one particle to its twin the instant a measurement was made. But every attempt to catch that invisible courier failed. Every test closed loopholes, extended distances, tightened synchronization, eliminated backdoors in the data, until nothing remained but the impossible. The update happens without travel, without transit, without time. Two particles respond as though no separation had ever existed to begin with. It is not the communication that is strange. It is the immediate certainty, the absolute, irreversible alignment that arrives with no delay and no cause that we can point to. An impossible message delivered without movement. And yet, the particles obey it without hesitation. This is the moment where our old intuition collapses. Because if information can appear instantly in two different locations, then location must be the illusion, not the information. Light travels, objects move, signals propagate, but entanglement reveals. To understand how violent this idea truly is, picture a pair of entangled photons separated by half a world. One rests in a lab in Shanghai. The other floats above the Canary Islands, waiting in a detector built with atomic precision. The first photon is measured, its polarization locked in place. And in the same breath, without crossing oceans or clouds or the curvature of the Earth, the second photon responds, not afterward, not soon, but precisely when the first one collapses into being. It is as though the universe is not relaying anything, it is updating itself in a single, indivisible instant. A mini earthquake in the fabric of understanding, because an update without movement suggests a deeper kind of space beneath our space. A space where does not matter, because everything rests inside the same underlying structure. You could call it a field, or a substrate, or the quantum vacuum. But none of those names truly grasp the stillness it implies. A stillness older than energy, older than measurement, older even than the concept of before and after. The impossible message is not a message at all. It is the awakening of a shared identity. Two particles revealing the same truth from different corners of the visible world. And if that is the case, then information does not move between them, it belongs to both, which leads to the next fracture in our understanding of reality. If information is not exchanged, then what collapses the wave? What chooses the outcome? What enforces the match? The universe, quiet as ever, does not give the answer easily. It hints, it trembles, it lets questions accumulate like dust on a forgotten instrument. And somewhere in that dust lies the next realization, one that physicists have tried again and again to avoid. If information does not travel, then motion itself must be redefined, not as a path, not as a journey, but as a shifting of relationships inside a single, indivisible whole. That redefinition, fragile and luminous, forms the threshold of the next chapter, where the hidden threads beneath space begin to show their first shape. The impossible message, that silent update between particles separated by oceans of darkness, forces the next truth into focused truth that has been drifting beneath our understanding like a buried continent. If information does not cross space, then space itself cannot be the foundation upon which reality rests. Something deeper must hold the universe together, a substrate upon which distance, direction, and dimension are mere shadows, and that substrate, whatever its name, must be where information truly lives. For centuries, physicists imagined space as a vast emptiness, an infinite nothing, a backdrop on which celestial bodies moved like dancers across a dark stage. But the closer we looked, the more that emptiness began to quiver, as if holding its breath. Quantum experiments detected fluctuations where nothing should be. Tiny sparks of activity appeared and vanished in the vacuum. Space was no longer empty, it was restless. In this restlessness, the first hint of the hidden threads emerged. When particles interact, we imagine they exchange forces: photons for electromagnetism, gluons for the strong force, gravitons for gravity, if they exist at all. But beneath these elegant exchanges lies something stranger, fields that do not simply transmit influence, but define the existence of particles themselves. Electrons do not move through the electromagnetic field. They are excitations of it. Quarks do not travel inside a force. They are knots of tension within it. Every particle, every spark, every vibration, all of them are patterns written upon fields. And fields fill all of space. But even that statement is misleading. Fields do not sit inside space the way mist sits inside air. Fields are the structure upon which space is drawn. They are the hidden threads that stretch beneath everything visible, silent but absolute. Imagine a vast ocean too dark to see. The waves and crests upon its surface might appear to be separate, distinct objects, but beneath them lies a single body of water, connected and undivided. In the same way, entangled particles may look like separate events, separated by light years, but the hidden fields they belong to do not care about such distances. Those fields hold both particles within the same underlying fabric. This is why entanglement remains instantaneous. The update does not travel across the ocean, it ripples through a single, unified substance. When you measure one particle, you do not send a message to the other. You disturb the underlying field, and the field responds everywhere at once. The hidden threads are not lines or fibers stretching through space. They are the foundation of what space is, its grain, its weave, its unseen architecture. Every point in space is not a location, but a pattern within those threads. Every distance is just a way of counting differences in the fabric. And once you begin to understand this, the very idea of speed starts to dissolve. Speed is a measure of how long it takes one event to influence another across distance. But if distance is not fundamental, if events are simply rearrangements of the underlying field, then speed is not a fundamental property either. It is an illusion created by beings who experience reality from the surface, not from the depth where the hidden threads lie. The quantum vacuum, the so-called empty space, becomes the most active place in the universe. It churns with virtual particles flickering into existence, borrowing energy from the void, and then dissolving back into it. These fluctuations are not noise, they are the heartbeat of the hidden substrate. They are the evidence that the threads beneath space are always vibrating, always adjusting, always updating. When you consider this trembling ocean beneath reality, light begins to look different. Light is not simply a wave traveling through emptiness. It is a disturbance in the electromagnetic field, a ripple in one layer of the hidden threads. Its speed is limited because the properties of that field constrain how fast disturbances can propagate. But the deeper substrate, the one that holds entanglement, the one that updates everywhere at once, does not obey these constraints. It does not ripple, it does not propagate, it exists. To speak of propagation is already to rise too far toward the visible surface. Beneath, there is no propagation. There is only transformation. This is why the update between entangled particles does not respect the speed of light. It does not move through the electromagnetic field. It moves through the deeper field, the one that threads through all other fields, the one that contains them. Some scientists call it the quantum vacuum. Others call it the zero-point field. Some whisper about the holographic substrate or the Planck scale foam, where space-time itself begins to disintegrate into discrete bits. But names do not matter. What matters is that beneath every measurement, every observation, every piece of information exchanged by the universe, lies a network of perfect stillness. A network where everything touches everything else, not through distance but through identity. You are not looking at a cosmos where information travels faster than light. You are looking at a cosmos where information does not travel at all. This is not a trivial shift. It is the first crack in the dominant worldview of centuries. If information is not bound to motion, then causality becomes more fluid than we imagined. If information belongs to a field that underlies space, then space is not the beginning of physics, it is a consequence. And if space is a consequence, then so is time. The hidden threads beneath space do not care about the flow of time. They do not distinguish between past and future. They do not track before and after. They simply hold the universe in coherence, generating the appearance of time through the unfolding of patterns. Events do not follow one another because time pushes them forward. They follow because the underlying field reconfigures itself moment by moment, weaving the illusion of temporal order. This view is unsettling because it erases the boundary between here and there, between now and then. But it also reveals something profound about your place in the universe. Your thoughts, those flashes, those sensations, those quiet intuitions are not signals traveling across a brain. They are patterns emerging in a deeper substrate, shaped by the same hidden threads that govern particles, fields, and space itself. You are not separate from the universe's fabric. You are part of it, a localized expression of a vast underlying sea. This is why consciousness remains so difficult to locate physically. It is not an object. It is a dynamic pattern, a ripple emerging from beneath space, just as entanglement does. And if consciousness arises from the same deeper field that binds the universe together, then perhaps the speed of thought is not measured in meters per second or milliseconds of neural firing. Perhaps thought, like entanglement, is instantaneous, not because it travels instantly, but because it does not travel at all. It appears everywhere it needs to appear. It updates where it must. It reveals itself in the same breath across the hidden threads. This is the bridge that begins to form between the physics of entanglement and the mysteries of mind. It is not that the brain is quantum in the way particles are. It is that both are expressions of the same underlying substrate. Thought and entanglement obey similar logic because they arise from the same place. A place without distance, a place without travel, a place where information simply is. As we move deeper into this landscape, the next question becomes unavoidable. If the hidden threads beneath space can update everywhere at once, and if entanglement is merely one small expression of this deeper reality, then what other phenomena are shaped by the same unseen architecture? The answer waits in the next chamber, where the collapse of the wave function reveals its true nature. A collapse not caused by measurement, not caused by observation, but caused by something far older and far quieter, hidden beneath the face of reality. A collapse that will transform your understanding of what it means for anything to exist at all. The hidden threads beneath space hold the universe together with a stillness so complete that distance begins to lose meaning. But this stillness is only the first surface of a deeper, stranger truth, one that reveals itself when a possibility becomes a fact, when a wave of potential sharpens into a single event, the moment we call collapse. For decades, the collapse of the wave function has been treated as an oddity, a mathematical step, a bookkeeping method, a way to take the shimmering haze of quantum probabilities and force them into the crispness of measurement. But beneath the formulas lies a much quieter phenomenon, one that does not behave like motion, force, or influence. Collapse is not a process, it is a revelation. Imagine a particle as a cloud of possibilities, a spread of potential states all superimposed upon one another. These possibilities are not locations. They are relationships, patterns in the underlying field. When you measure the particle, you do not choose one location out of many. You affect the deeper field and allow one relationship to become visible. The collapse does not travel outward from your measurement. It does not move across space. It does not ripple out like sound or light. It completes itself everywhere simultaneously, as though the entire substrate were waiting, holding its breath, until one configuration crystallized into being, instantly, absolutely, indivisibly. This is why every attempt to measure a speed for collapse has failed. There is no lag, no propagation, no trace of motion. The underlying field updates as a single unit. This realization unsettled the first physicists who dared to examine it. If collapse has no speed, then what does speed mean? If an event can manifest everywhere at once, then what does once mean? The deeper they looked, the more the familiar shapes of reality, motion, causality, sequence began to dissolve, replaced by something that looked less like physics and more like a quiet unfolding of information. Consider two entangled particles again, suspended in the dark. Before you measure them, their joint state is not two separate clouds of possibilities. It is one cloud, one shared wave across the hidden threads. When one particle collapses, the entire cloud collapses. Both particles reveal the outcome together, not one after the other, not by influence, but by identity. The collapse is not an event happening in two places. It is one event happening in one underlying field, expressed through two locations on the surface. This is the heart of the strangeness. Collapse is not spatial, it is structural. It does not occur in space. It rearranges the foundation that gives rise to space. When the wave function collapses, reality is not modified. Reality is selected. The underlying field chooses one branch of itself to reveal. Every other branch remains possible but hidden, woven into the unseen architecture. And what determines that choice? Not distance, not speed, not even time. The collapse obeys no temporal sequence. It is indifferent to before and after. It simply carves a path through the haze of possibility, a path that feels like time only to beings who experience life as a chain of moments. But beneath those moments lies a continuous substrate where events are not separated by intervals. They are patterns revealed in the order that consciousness perceives them, not in the order that the universe generates them. And consciousness, as we will see later, is not separate from this process. It is part of the same unfolding. But for now, the collapse must remain our guide. To understand why collapse is instantaneous, imagine holding a sheet of fabric tightly stretched. Touch a single point, and the tension rearranges everywhere at once. The change does not travel. It completes. It updates the entire sheet in one unbroken motion. The hidden threads beneath space are like that, except the sheet has no edges, no underside, no outside. It is not spread across space. Space is spread across it. And this substrate does not permit partial updates. It acts as unity or not at all. It reveals fully or not at all. It collapses everywhere or nowhere. This is why collapse appears to break relativity. Einstein's equations describe the behavior of things inside space-time. But collapse does not occur inside space-time. It occurs beneath it. It updates the geometry itself, not the objects within it. Relativity applies to the surface. Collapse belongs to the depth. And in that depth, nothing moves, because nothing needs to travel. To ask how fast collapse happens is to ask the wrong question. Collapse does not happen in time. Time is something the collapse helps generate. It forges the arrow of moments by selecting one configuration after another, like a hand turning pages from within the book rather than from without. This is why quantum theory and relativity, when placed side by side, never quite fit. They are describing different layers of the same universe. Relativity speaks the language of surfaces, space, motion, energy. Quantum mechanics speaks the language of depth, possibility, selection, revelation. Collapse is the bridge between the two. A bridge without length, a bridge without speed, a bridge made not of motion, but of choice. And yet, the universe does not choose arbitrarily. Patterns emerge, correlations appear, probability flows like a river beneath the visible world. The hidden substrate follows precise rules, rules that define how likely each collapse is to occur. But the moment of collapse itself, the instant where possibility becomes fact, obeys no speed limit, because it does not travel to arrive. It simply becomes. This becoming is the true heartbeat of the universe, not the ticking of clocks, not the cycles of stars, but the quiet, constant transition from could be to is. This transition, this collapse, shapes everything: the existence of particles, the evolution of matter, the unfolding of galaxies, the flow of time itself. And it shapes something else, something still more mysterious, something that will rise slowly in later chapters: the emergence of mind. Because collapse is not just the mechanism that defines reality, it is the mechanism that defines experience. It marks the border between the unobserved and the observed, between the invisible potential of the world and the visible moment you inhabit. And the deeper you look, the more it becomes impossible to separate collapse from awareness. But that connection must wait. For now, collapse reveals a more immediate truth, a truth that cracks the surface of our old beliefs. If collapse has no speed, then the notion of speed itself is secondary. If collapse updates everywhere at once, then the universe is not a machine pushing signals forward. It is a field revealing states across its entire structure. And if that field exists beneath space, then perhaps space is not what we think it is. The next chamber of this story opens on that realization, where the idea of motion begins to bend, and the universe reveals the first hint that it might not be moving at all. The collapse of the wave function reveals itself with such indifference to distance that a new realization begins to rise, slow and inevitable. the universe does not wait. It does not pause for light to reach across the dark. It does not delay its updates until signals wander from one place to another. It does not measure separation the way we do. Waiting belongs to creatures who live on the surface of time. But the deeper substrate, the one that collapse belongs to, knows nothing of sequence. This becomes undeniable in the experiments that followed the early entanglement studies. To test whether distant particles truly respond without delay, physicists pushed them farther apart. They placed detectors on opposite ends of cities, then on different islands, then across mountains, across oceans, bouncing photons off mirrors hung in the vacuum of space. And still, the universe refused to wait. Measure one particle and its twin so far away that even light would need time to arrive, responded instantly. The result appeared with the same certainty, the same precision, the same refusal to acknowledge distance. It was as though the underlying field did not even register the separation, as though the two locations were the same point from its perspective. It is tempting to imagine that the particles send something to each other, that some hidden signal outruns light, darting through the darkness faster than the universe should allow. But with every new experiment, physicists closed loopholes, tightened synchronization, placed detectors behind random number generators so fast that no signal, even an illicit, hidden one, could predict or influence the outcome. And still, the universe updates itself without hesitation. This is where the old idea of locality begins to fracture. Locality says that objects can only be influenced by their immediate surroundings, that the world behaves like a network of interactions, each traveling outward at finite speed. But entanglement tears locality apart with the gentlest possible gesture by refusing to acknowledge the boundary that locality depends on. Bell's theorem, that quiet bomb dropped into the foundation of physics, proved that no local theory could explain the correlations seen in entangled particles. Something non-local, something beyond the constraints of distance was necessary. And yet, this non-local behavior carries no energy, no useful signal, no message that can be exploited. It violates no rule of relativity, because relativity governs movement, not update. It constrains speed, not simultaneity. Entanglement does not contradict relativity. It bypasses it. Relativity governs the surface, the geometry of space-time. Entanglement lives beneath that surface, the geometry of information. When the two are confused, conflict arises. But when they are understood as layers, the contradiction dissolves. Surface phenomena follow the speed of light. Deep phenomena do not travel. They reveal. They unfold. They simply adjust the underlying field. This is why the universe does not wait. It has nothing to wait for. Waiting is an artifact of distance, and distance is an artifact of the visible world. In the deeper field, all points are already present, already connected, already part of a single, continuous structure. There is no journey to make, no destination to reach. Updating one point means updating the whole. This realization carries unsettling implications. It means that the geometry we live in, the one that governs planets, engines, bodies, thoughts, is not the fundamental geometry of existence. The universe we see is a projection, shaped like a map that flattens the truth into something navigable. Light moves across this map. Matter travels through its lanes. Signals propagate along its coordinates. But beneath the map lies a domain where travel is meaningless. A domain where every location is woven into every other. Where time is a sequence only because the surface demands it. Where distance is a convenient story told to beings who evolved to walk. Once you accept that the universe does not wait, another thought begins to surface, delicate but persistent. Motion itself may not be what it seems. We imagine movement as a change in position over time. But if the deeper substrate does not distinguish between positions, if all positions are expressions of the same field, then movement becomes something far stranger. Perhaps objects do not cross space. Perhaps space rearranges itself around the objects. Perhaps what we call motion is the visible shadow of something changing beneath visibility. Physicists have brushed against this idea many times through quantum tunneling, through instant correlations, through the unsettling symmetry between particles that should never have met. And each time, the same question returns. If the universe does not wait, what else does it refuse to do? Does it truly allow objects to travel? Or does it simply shift patterns within the hidden field? Does a photon move from star to eye? Or does the underlying structure reveal a sequence that feels like motion? The next chapter opens upon that threshold, the point where movement begins to unravel, and the boundary between observer and event blurs into something the classical world was never prepared to admit. If the universe does not wait, then the universe might not move. It might only change, and change has no speed. The idea that the universe does not wait leads to a deeper, more delicate fracture in our understanding. A fracture not in physics, but in perception. Because if the universe updates itself without motion, and if motion itself may be nothing more than a rearrangement of the hidden substrate, then we arrive at a place where the very act of seeing becomes suspicious. A place where the observer, rather than witnessing reality, is shaping the appearance of it. For centuries, humans imagined themselves as detached viewers, standing outside the cosmic machinery, watching events unfold like scenes on a vast stage. But the closer we looked, the more the universe insisted that there is no outside, no detachment, no vantage point where observation can be separated from creation. And nowhere is this insistence stronger than in the quantum world. At the heart of quantum theory lies an unsettling truth. Before measurement, a particle is not a thing. It is not an object in space. It is not a point with a hidden location waiting to be uncovered. It is a spread of possibilities, a haze of potential states living in the deeper substrate beneath space. When you observe it, you do not uncover its position. You create its position, not by forcing it, not by influencing it, but by selecting one branch of the underlying field to reveal. This selection, this collapse, has no speed because it is not a change. It is a choice within the structure that already exists. A choice that happens everywhere at once, because the substrate does not fragment reality into pieces the way surface space does. And here, the observer enters not as a witness, but as a participant. The very act of seeing changes what is seen. This principle, so often repeated that its strangeness risks fading, is the first thread of a larger illusion. The illusion that reality exists independently of the mind perceiving it. The deeper field does not present a fixed universe. It presents a fluid field of potentialities, and the observer's interaction with that field is what crystallizes the visible. Consider this. Before you observe a particle, it does not have a single path. It does not travel from point A to point B. It explores all possible paths simultaneously, a shimmering cloud of trajectories woven through the hidden substrate. Only when you measure the outcome does one path become real. The others fade into silence, not because they vanish, but because they remain unselected. The universe reveals only what you ask of it. This revelation, immediate and global, is what misleads us into believing that information travels, that something moves across space to bring us the result. But this belief arises from the surface world, where perception is bound to the rhythm of time and the geometry of distance. The deeper world does not obey these rhythms. It unfolds everywhere simultaneously. It holds all possibilities at once. It does not distinguish between here and there until an observer asks it to, and once asked, it answers instantly, not through motion, not through propagation, but through revelation. This is why the observer's role is so difficult to accept. It forces us to abandon the idea of a universe out there, functioning independently, waiting for us to peer inside. It insists that the visible world is a partnership and interaction between the observer and the underlying field. But this partnership has a hidden consequence. If reality only becomes definite upon observation, then the universe that you see is not the same universe another being sees. Each observer carves a unique slice through the field of potential, a personalized thread through the ocean of possibilities. And yet, somehow, these individualized slices remain consistent with one another. How? Because the deeper field does not update separately for each observer. It updates as a single, unified structure, and all observers are embedded within it. When one collapse occurs, the global substrate adjusts in a way that is coherent for everyone. Your observation shapes your experience, but it does not break the universe for others. The substrate is coherent enough, unified enough, to accommodate all perspectives without contradiction, a feat that no classical system could achieve. This coherence reveals a new layer to the observer's illusion, the belief that your perspective is personal. In truth, your perspective is a localized expression of the universal field. You are not observing the universe from the outside. You are the universe observing itself from the inside. And this shifts the question from what is the observer to what is doing the observing. What is this thing we call awareness? Where does it sit in the hierarchy of fields? Is it a byproduct of neurons, or is it a property of the deeper substrate itself? Quantum experiments suggest that awareness and collapse may be inseparable, that the act of observing is not performed by the brain alone, but by something more fundamental, the capacity of the universe to reveal itself. In the classical world, we imagine information traveling, flowing, being carried from place to place. But in the quantum world, information does not move. It is simply waiting, distributed across the field, until a question is asked. The answer appears instantly, not because the universe is fast, but because the universe is whole. To see anything at all is to carve a boundary within that wholeness. To perceive is to demand a choice from the field. To exist as an observer is to shape the visible world. This is the illusion, believing that you stand at a distance from reality, when in truth, reality is shaped through you. And the illusion does not end there. It extends into the very structure of time. We imagine time as a river flowing forward, but if collapse is instantaneous and global, then time cannot be the flow of events. Instead, time becomes the order in which collapses are experienced by the observer. The universe does not evolve through time. The observer experiences a sequence of revelations and calls it time. This places the observer in a strange position, not outside the universe, not inside it, but at the boundary between possibility and actuality. A boundary where information does not travel, but appears. And if the observer shapes how potential becomes reality, then the speed of information becomes even more suspect, because in this deeper picture, information never moves. Information is the structure from which your experience is carved. This leads to a delicate, unsettling possibility. The speed limit we impose on the cosmos, the speed of light, might be a limit of perception, not a limit of the deeper substrate. Light moves at a fixed pace, because that pace is woven into the geometry of the visible world. But the deeper field does not contain geometry. It contains coherence. And coherence has no need for speed. This coherence is why entanglement is instant. It is why collapse has no delay. It is why the universe does not wait. But coherence has another consequence, one that bridges physics with something more intimate, more personal. Because if the observer shapes collapse, and collapse shapes reality, then consciousness is not a spectator in the universe. It is a participant in the creation of the visible world. This idea will grow stronger in later chapters. For now, it remains a quiet presence beneath the surface, shaping the boundaries of what we believe ourselves to be. And as that presence deepens, it opens the next chamber of this unfolding story. A chamber where signals that do not travel reveal the architecture of a universe that never needed speed to begin with. A universe that reveals itself not through motion, but through memory. There is a moment, after the observer's illusion begins to settle into place, when the universe feels strangely transparent, not because you now understand it, but because the structure beneath understanding becomes visible faintly, like bones beneath skin. It is in this dim clarity that the next truth emerges. Not all signals move. Some signals simply are. This idea defies every instinct of the surface world. From childhood, we are taught that information must be carried through light, through sound, through touch, through nerves and wires and waves. Messages, we believe, must have a sender and a receiver. They must begin somewhere and arrive somewhere else. But what if a message does not begin? What if it does not arrive? What if it simply exists, shared across the field that underlies space-time, waiting to be revealed by the right question? This is what quantum experiments began to whisper, softly but insistently. Physicists at Delft University, at MIT, at NIST, and in the satellites orbiting Earth, all repeated variations of the same test. Separate entangled particles so far apart that even the fastest classical signal could not possibly link them. Then test whether any influence could pass between them without violating relativity. Again and again, the universe answered with the same pattern, the pattern that has haunted physics for decades. The correlations appear instantly, but nothing travels to create them. To understand this strangeness, imagine holding two mirrors in opposite corners of a vast, dark hall. Shine a light into one mirror, and immediately the other mirror brightens, not because the light crossed the room, but because both mirrors are fragments of a single, larger reflection buried beneath the floor. The light you see is not a signal traveling from one mirror to the other. It is a revelation emerging from the same hidden source. This is the architecture the quantum world hints at. Signals that do not traverse space, but appear as coordinated revelations from a deeper structure, the structure that binds all points of spacetime into a single, coherent whole. Physicists sometimes call these patterns non-local correlations. But the word non-local, though correct, is misleading. It implies that the universe occasionally violates locality. The truth is far sharper. The universe is non-local from the beginning. Locality is only a property of the surface, like the sheen on water that hides the currents below. The deeper field does not honor locality because locality is not part of its design. To explore how signals can exist without traveling, you must abandon the idea of space as a container. Instead, imagine space as a language, a grammar imposed by the visible world. Two events appear far apart because the surface representation encodes them as distant. But in the deeper substrate, they exist within the same immediate neighborhood, not a physical neighborhood, but a structural one. When one event updates, the structure updates. When the structure updates, all related events update as well. Nothing crosses the gap because the gap itself is a surface illusion. This is why entanglement confuses classical intuition. The classical mind sees two particles. The deeper field sees one state. Every update is a global update. Every revelation is a field-wide revelation. Every signal is a structural shift, not a movement. And once you see this, the speed of light becomes something different, not a cosmic limit, but a boundary of the surface. Light moves at its fixed speed because that is the speed at which disturbances propagate within the visible layer of reality. Signals that belong to the underlying field do not propagate. They do not traverse. They do not obey C. They do not obey time. They are. They reveal. They unfold. This unfolding has been detected indirectly in countless experiments, not through faster-than-light communication, which the universe steadfastly forbids, but through the eerie precision of quantum predictions. No matter how far apart the events are, the correlations remain perfect, as though space were not a barrier, but a suggestion. This perfection reveals something profound. The universe is not built from parts interacting across distances. It is built from relationships expressed across a single field. The field does not stretch across space. Space stretches across the field. To understand how these signals reveal themselves, consider the following metaphor. Picture a tapestry woven so tightly that every thread touches every other. Now, imagine plucking one corner. The entire tapestry shifts. To an observer standing on the surface, it might look like the disturbance spread across the cloth, but to the threads themselves, nothing spread. They simply adjusted as one. This is what the universe does. The hidden substrate updates globally. The surface world interprets that update as instantaneous influence. But nothing traveled. Nothing pursued a path. Nothing carried the message. We only perceive the illusion of travel because our senses are bound to the surface geometry. Movement is the language of the visible world, not the logic of the underlying one. This difference reveals a delicate frontier where physics begins to touch philosophy. If signals do not move, if information does not travel, then the world we experience, full of motion and exchange, is a kind of rendering, a projection, a surface stitched together moment by the deeper field. Your thoughts, too, may belong to this rendering. When an idea forms in your mind, you feel it as a sequence, a beginning, a middle, an end. But the deeper field may not generate thoughts in sequence. It may reveal them all at once, with consciousness selecting the path through the tapestry in the same way measurement selects the path of a particle. In this sense, thinking does not feel like a signal, because it is not one. The emergence of a thought is not the travel of information, but the selection of a pattern. The substrate reveals, the mind experiences. And this brings us to the quiet center of this chapter, the moment where signals that do not travel begin to reshape our understanding, not only of physics, but of ourselves. If the universe reveals instead of sending, then perhaps consciousness is not receiving signals. Perhaps consciousness is participating in the revelation. This possibility opens a dangerous, beautiful door, a door that will become important much later, when we reach the question of whether the universe itself might possess something akin to awareness. But for now, it is enough to recognize that the signals we see, the correlations we measure, the information we extract from nature, none of it arrives. It appears, and because it appears rather than travels, it sidesteps the limits imposed by light, time, and motion. It belongs to the deeper substrate, where no distance exists and no speed is needed. This is the heart of the phenomenon. The next chapter approaches the turning point, where recognition between particles gives way to a far stranger idea, the universe updating itself, without regard to motion, forming a logic that even physicists struggle to accept. The notion that the universe might think without traveling, that it might update itself without moving, and that what we call speed might be nothing more than a property of the surface, not the depth. The next movement begins there, where thought emerges without motion, where the deeper field reveals its true flexibility, where light itself begins to lose its privilege, where information stops pretending that it needs to go anywhere at all. Something shifts when you finally accept that signals do not travel, not because the universe is breaking its own rules, but because the rules you believed in were designed for a world painted on the surface, not for the world beneath it. As this realization settles, another begins to rise, quiet and vast. Perhaps nothing in the universe truly moves. What we call movement, the drifting of stars, the spreading of galaxies, the trembling of atoms, even the racing of thoughts, may be nothing more than the reshaping of deeper patterns. Patterns that unfold without crossing distance, without sliding through time, without carrying anything from place to place. At first, this idea feels impossible. Movement is one of the oldest sensations we know. We feel our bodies shift. We watch light traverse the night. We measure the orbit of planets, the spin of black holes. the flow of entire clusters drifting apart. But beneath these sensations lies something far stranger. To see it, imagine a simple animation, a flipbook, in which every page contains a slightly different drawing. When you run your thumb along the edge, the images appear to move. Characters run, clouds glide, trees sway, yet nothing moves. The pages are still. Motion is the illusion created when stillness is experienced in sequence. Now imagine a universe-scale flipbook, but instead of pages stacked in space, the pages are stacked in the deeper substrate. Each configuration of the hidden field is a page. Each collapse of potential into actuality is a turn of the page. Your awareness rides along that sequence, interpreting the shift as motion, time, causality. But beneath your experience lies only change, not travel. This is the essence of thought without motion. Thought feels like movement because you experience it along a sequence. But in the deeper substrate, thoughts do not travel from neuron to neuron. They arise as global updates, synchronized reconfigurations of the neural field, emerging from the same substrate that governs entanglement and collapse. Your mind does not send signals, it reveals states, and revelation has no speed. This realization is not merely poetic, it is wired into the structure of physics. Consider the brain. Neurons fire, yes, but the feeling of a thought arriving from somewhere is misleading. The thought is not a packet of information moving across a circuit. It is the collapse of a pattern across a network. The substrate updates the configuration of the neural field in one indivisible event. Then your consciousness experiences the pattern in its own sequence. A thought is not transmitted, it is disclosed. Quantum biology hints at this, though it remains a young science. Long-range coherence in biological systems, instantaneous synchronization across neural assemblies, signals that appear faster than electrochemical propagation would allow. None of these observations break physics. They reveal that our model of signal transmission is too shallow. We assume the brain sends messages, but perhaps the brain selects patterns that were already present in the deeper field, much like entangled particles revealing correlated outcomes rather than exchanging them. If this is true, and evidence grows quietly in its direction, then even your own mind is a place where information does not travel. It crystallizes. It becomes. The turning point of this entire story rests here. If thought can exist without motion in the brain, then the universe can exist without motion at large. Thought without motion and entanglement without speed are not separate mysteries. They are reflections of the same underlying truth. Information does not move. Information updates. And the substrate that updates the universe does not recognize the geometry of space. It does not care for the rhythm of time. It does not wait for anything to arrive. Because nothing needs to arrive. Everything is already present within it. This realization reframes the cosmos. It turns galaxies into shifting patterns. It turns the expansion of the universe into a reconfiguration of the underlying field. It turns light once worshipped as the ultimate traveler into a boundary condition of the surface world, not the depth. The speed of light becomes a property of how disturbances propagate across the visible layer. But the deeper layer does not propagate. It unfolds. It synchronizes. It updates the whole structure at once. We experience this update as time. We interpret it as motion. We call it causality. But these interpretations are surface-level translations of a deeper, unified process. It is here, in this turning point, that the idea of movement begins to dissolve, not because nothing changes, but because change does not require motion. Change does not require travel. Change does not require the sending of signals. Change is the rhythm of the substrate becoming new configurations of itself. And we, perched on the surface, like shadows cast by deeper patterns, interpret that rhythm as the march of time and the flow of events. This perspective reshapes the very meaning of speed. If nothing truly moves, then speed belongs only to the surface world, the world that interprets updates as motion rather than revelation. And so, the question at the heart of this chapter emerges, clear and steady. If the universe does not move but updates, and if thoughts do not travel but emerge, then what is doing the updating? What is the engine beneath existence? What is the field that synchronizes galaxies and neurons alike? What is the substrate that unites entanglement, collapse, coherence, perception? No classical theory answers this. No simple geometry describes it. No particle represents it. But physics has begun to circle around its edges in quantum fields, in vacuum fluctuations, in holographic dualities that hint that space-time itself is a projection rather than a fundamental layer. In every direction, the clues point downward, beneath particles, beneath forces, beneath space-time, to something more primary, a field that does not move because it is the place where all motion is drawn, a field that does not signal because it contains the logic of all signals, a field that does not travel because it is the geometry of presence itself. The next chapter opens upon this unspoken domain, the quiet architecture, where individuality dissolves and the universe reveals its unity not through motion, but through simultaneous existence. A place where speed becomes irrelevant, where thought becomes structure, where information becomes identity, and where the hidden field beneath everything finally begins to take shape. The question left hanging at the end of the previous chapter lingers in the quiet, like a breath the universe has not yet released. If nothing moves and everything updates, then what is doing the updating? The surface world offers no answer. Motion, force, momentum, these are descriptions of the visible layer, shadows cast by a deeper process that does not resemble movement at all. To understand the mechanism beneath, you must step beyond the idea of particles pushing one another through space. You must step into a model of reality, where the fundamental currency is not energy, not matter, not even time, but state. Imagine the universe not as a collection of objects, but as a single, vast configuration. Not a sculpture, but a tapestry. Not a machine, but a pattern endlessly rewriting itself, one global update after another. Each update is not local. It is not constrained by distance. It does not originate in one place and travel outward. It happens everywhere, simultaneously, like a new frame in a cosmic film. In a cellular automaton, a simple mathematical universe, each frame of reality is a complete configuration, and the next frame follows from rules written into the structure. Nothing travels, nothing moves. Everything simply becomes the next state. What if the universe behaves the same way, but with rules far deeper than any automaton we can imagine? Quantum mechanics hints at this constantly. Entanglement, wave function, collapse, non-local correlations, all of them point to a universe that behaves like a single distributed computation, updating itself globally rather than transmitting signals locally. Even gravity, when examined through the lens of holography, begins to look like an emergent effect, a property derived from the way information is encoded on the boundary of space-time rather than within it. Space-time itself, in these models, is not fundamental. It is a construct, a rendering generated by deeper informational rules. The universe updates states. Space-time displays the updates. This means the geometry we see, distances, durations, the finite speed of light, is not the engine of the update. It is the interface. Light is not fast because it is powerful. It is fast because it is the pace at which the surface renders change. But the underlying change, the update that drives everything, does not occur in space-time at all. It occurs beneath space-time, the way a computer's logic gates operate beneath the pixels. On a screen, the pixels may refresh at a limited rate. The underlying circuitry has no such limit. The visible layer is slow because it is built on constraints. The deeper layer is instantaneous because it is built on identity. Identity is the core principle of the deeper substrate. Two entangled particles do not communicate. They express the same identity. Two distant events do not exchange signals. They participate in the same global update. The universe is not populated by independent objects. It is a single, coherent structure, divided only in appearance. This reframes all questions of causality. When a cause produces an effect, we imagine a signal bridging them motion through space, the transmission of force, the transfer of energy, but in the deeper field, cause and effect are simply two aspects of the same update. The universe does not wait for one event to influence another. It reveals both as part of the same structural shift. What appears to us as sequential is, from the perspective of the substrate, simultaneous. What appears to be motion is simply the difference between one update and the next. And this is why information does not need to travel. It is woven into the entire structure. Updating the structure updates the information everywhere. To see this clearly, imagine a vast mandala made of sand. If you change one pattern within it, the entire design shifts meaning. The sand has not moved across the mandala, but the update, the meaning, the pattern changes everywhere at once. The universe behaves like that mandala. Beneath its visible layers lies a field where the concept of place dissolves. All locations are expressions of the same substrate. All events are expressions of the same updating rule. This is why the deeper physics often feels more like logic than mechanics. Quantum mechanics is not a theory of things. It is a theory of allowable states. The universe is not a map. It is a computation unfolding across a substrate with no spatial boundaries. But the computation is not mechanical, not sequential. It is holistic. Every update arises from the entire structure. Every structure arises from the entire update. This is the loop that forms the heart of reality. Structure determines update, and update determines structure. Not in time, not in motion, in pure unfolding. This unfolding is what we experience as time, but beneath time lies no flow, no river, no arrow. Time is the ordering of updates. Updates are the reconfigurations of structure. Structure is the expression of information. And information is not transmitted, it exists. As this understanding deepens, the idea of individuality begins to blur. If the universe updates as one whole, then nothing is truly separate. Differences arise only in the patterns the substrate chooses to reveal differences in configuration, not differences in essence. Matter is pattern, light is pattern, thought is pattern. Consciousness itself may be a pattern not created by the brain, but expressed through it. This realization echoes quietly into everything. Your mind, your memories, your awareness are not signals racing through neurons. They are updates to the configuration of your neural field, synchronized with the deeper field that shapes the entire universe. What you experience as thought may be a local expression of the universe updating itself. This is not mysticism. It is the logical consequence of a non-local substrate. If the field that updates reality connects all points directly, then consciousness cannot be isolated. It does not travel. It emerges. It emerges in the same way collapse emerges, in the same way entanglement emerges, in the same way time emerges. Identity and update are intertwined. Being and becoming are the same operation. And this operation, this universal update, carries us now into the next chapter where the substrate's quiet memory begins to show itself, revealing how even emptiness holds the trace of every pattern the universe has ever expressed. A memory without motion, a memory without distance, a memory woven into the deepest layer of existence, where the vacuum itself begins to tremble with meaning. The deeper you follow the universe into the logic of updates, the more one question begins to hover beneath every thought. If the universe is a network of instantaneous reconfigurations, then where are those configurations stored? Where does the pattern live between one update and the next? What holds the memory of the universe? For centuries, the answer was assumed to be nowhere. Empty space was thought to be empty. A vacuum was a void, a clean canvas waiting for matter to paint its shapes upon it. The nothingness between stars was simply nothing, silent, featureless, forgotten. But the closer physicists pushed their instruments toward zero, the more the vacuum resisted. It began to tremble. It hummed. It flickered with particles that were not really particles, ghostly excitations that appeared and vanished faster than any clock could measure. The vacuum was not empty. It was alive, sea-like, restless, endlessly whispering. And in that whisper, something ancient hid, a memory. Not a memory like a photograph or a record, but a memory woven into the very structure of the vacuum, a memory of every configuration the universe has ever expressed. To understand this, you must abandon the idea of emptiness. In the quantum world, there is no such thing as zero. Even when every particle is removed, every field set to minimum, every fluctuation squeezed out, the vacuum still pulses with energy. 0-point energy. A baseline trembling that cannot be silenced. This trembling is not random noise. It is the substrate's memory of possibility. Every particle that could exist flickers there. Every field resonates faintly there. Every configuration of the universe lies encoded in the patterns of vacuum fluctuations. The vacuum is not a blank space in which physics happens. The vacuum is the physics. It is the canvas, the archive, the operating system, the quiet memory underlying reality. When two entangled particles reveal correlated outcomes instantly, they do so not because a message passes between them, but because the vacuum holds their joint state as a single memory. When collapse occurs everywhere at once, it does not rattle across space, it reconfigures the vacuum's stored pattern. When the universe updates itself, the vacuum updates as well, absorbing the change into its bottomless architecture. The vacuum is where information lives when it is not being revealed, and the memory it holds is more immense than anything the visible world contains. The stars, galaxies, and nebulae you can see are a thin scattering of sparks. Beneath them lies a reservoir of information vast enough to encode every possible configuration of reality. To see this more clearly, imagine the universe as a vast ocean of trembling potential. The particles, forces, and fields that rise into visibility are like ripples on its surface, brief and bright. Beneath them, the ocean is storing everything, the ripples that have been, the ripples that could be, the ripples that will never appear but nevertheless shape the whole. The vacuum is the memory of the unused. This is why quantum fields are never truly still. The substrate that defines them never rests. It is constantly rewriting itself, refining its own architecture, embedding the traces of every collapse. Even empty space carries the fingerprints of past events, stored in correlations, in constraints, in the quiet structure of entanglement that permeates the whole cosmos. Nothing is forgotten. The universe keeps everything it has ever been inside the trembling of the vacuum. Even the notion of distance becomes suspect in this light. If memory is spread across the vacuum, then nothing is ever truly far away. Separation becomes a matter of perspective, not reality. The substrate holds every point in immediate relationship with every other point. The vacuum does not distinguish between here and there, near and far. Distance is a story the visible world tells itself. In the deeper layer, memory is everywhere. This omnipresent memory helps explain why the universe feels coherent, why events separated by billions of light years unfold in ways that obey the same laws. The laws are not imposed from above or transmitted from place to place. They are written into the vacuum, encoded into its trembling structure. The vacuum remembers the rules. It remembers the patterns. It remembers how to be a universe. This memory is not static. It evolves as the universe evolves. Every update writes something new into the substrate, a slight adjustment in the vacuum's hidden architecture, a quiet revision of the deeper logic. Even the expansion of the universe that great outward drift of galaxies into darkness, may not be motion in the classical sense. It could be the vacuum rewriting its own boundaries, reshaping its own geometry to express new configurations of stored information. You are living inside a memory that is rewriting itself, and your awareness is one of its instruments. This becomes clearer when we consider the behavior of virtual particles, the flickering ghosts that populate the vacuum. They appear and vanish because the substrate holds the possibility of all matter. When the universe updates, some possibilities crystallize into real particles. Others fade back into the trembling substrate, leaving only the faintest trace of their potential in the vacuum's memory. When you walk through a room, you think you are passing through empty space. But space is not empty. You are moving through a sea of memory, a sea woven from every configuration the universe has ever expressed. Every step you take ripples through a vacuum encoded with the logic of all previous steps taken by anything that has ever moved. This is why particles behave as though they know each other's presence even before interacting. The vacuum holds the record of every correlation. This is why fields obey laws with perfect consistency. The vacuum embeds the logic that governs them. This is why the universe does not lose coherence as it expands. Its memory grows with it. But the most startling consequence of this vacuum memory is its implication for thought itself. If awareness arises from patterns that emerge within the brain, and if the brain emerges from patterns embedded in the vacuum, then thought is not simply a local phenomenon. It is a sculpting of the substrate, a configuration etched into the vacuum's trembling, a brief, glowing signature on the universe's memory. Your thoughts are not confined to your skull. They are ripples in the vacuum. And because the vacuum is everywhere, thought touches the entire universe at once, not as information traveling outward, but as an update to the field that underlies all things. This is why consciousness can feel instantaneous, even though its neural correlates are bound to physical constraints. Consciousness is the expression of patterns in a substrate that does not recognize distance or speed. Thought does not move. Thought reveals. Thought updates. And the vacuum remembers. It remembers not by storing ideas as objects, but by shifting the pattern of the substrate ever so slightly, weaving your experiences into the architecture of possibility. You are part of the memory of the universe, not an observer, a participant, a contributor to the trembling fabric beneath reality. And as the vacuum continues to expand its archive, the next chapter begins to take shape, where the logic of entanglement deepens, and the universe reveals that its memory is not passive, but alive, shaping the structure of everything that emerges from it. A memory that does not merely record reality, but helps create it. The vacuum's trembling memory casts a long, quiet light across everything the universe reveals. Beneath every particle, every collapse, every flicker of thought, lies the same underlying architecture, a coherence so complete that the idea of separation begins to unravel. And as that coherence sharpens, the true nature of entanglement emerges, no longer as a strange exception but as a fundamental expression of how reality thinks. Entanglement is not a connection. It is not a signal. It is not a thread stretched between two particles. It is the logic of the substrate, a logic deeper than space, older than time, immune to distance, indifferent to speed. To understand this logic, you must stop imagining particles as beads scattered across a cosmic map. You must instead imagine patterns in a single field, ripples in a single ocean, expressions of a single equation vibrating through the trembling vacuum. The particles are shadows. The entanglement is the identity beneath the shadow. When two particles are entangled, they do not share information. They share meaning. Meaning that exists in the vacuum before either particle appears in the visible world. Meaning that is written into the substrate, not carried between points. Meaning that does not flow, but is. This meaning is what binds their outcomes together. When one reveals its state, the other does not respond. It reveals a piece of the same underlying meaning, the same global configuration, not because something traveled between them, but because nothing was ever separate to begin with. The universe does not update two particles. It updates one state expressed in two locations. This is the deep logic of entanglement. The visible world shows separation. The underlying world shows unity. The visible world shows distance. The underlying world shows structure. The visible world shows cause and effect. The underlying world shows a single unfolding. This is why entanglement feels impossible when seen from the surface. The surface teaches us that things must travel. The depth reveals that nothing ever needed to. The surface shows signals. The depth shows updates. The surface shows motion. The depth shows selection. Entanglement is not the universe breaking its own speed limit. It is the universe showing that speed does not apply where the substrate thinks. And this logic is everywhere, not in isolated experiments, not in contrived laboratory conditions, but in the very architecture of the cosmos. Stars coil around their galactic centers because gravity is an emergent property of the same substrate. Atoms hold together not because electrons orbit like planets, but because the vacuum supports stable patterns of possibility. Entanglement is not rare, it is the default. The problem is not that entanglement is strange. The problem is that locality, the idea that space separates things, is the illusion. To see the logic more clearly, imagine the universe as an immense, multidimensional grid of potential. Each point on the grid is not a location but a relationship, a way the substrate can configure itself. Entanglement is what happens when two visible events reference the same point in that deeper grid. They appear separate in the rendered world, but they occupy the same informational address. To the universe, they are adjacent. To us, they are galaxies apart. This logic reshapes the concept of cause. When one entangled particle reveals its state, we imagine it causing the other to take on a correlated state. But beneath causality lies correlation, not correlation as coincidence, but correlation as identity. Cause is the surface explanation for patterns emerging from the same deeper source. The universe does not move information from one particle to another. It moves both particles into the same revelation of the underlying pattern. Even more astonishing is that entanglement does not weaken with distance. It does not fade. It does not leak. It does not shrink. Its strength is the same whether particles are separated by nanometers or light years. This alone reveals more about the depth of the substrate than almost anything else. Distance has no meaning in the deeper field. Space is not the medium in which entanglement occurs. Space is what the substrate generates as an emergent layer, and the logic beneath that layer does not respect its geometry. This is where entanglement challenges classical thought most severely, not because it violates relativity, but because it reveals relativity's domain. Relativity governs what happens on the stage. Quantum logic governs what happens beneath the stage. Every contradiction dissolves once you stop. Expecting the rules of the surface to dictate the rules of the depth, the deep logic of entanglement is not mechanical. It is architectural. It describes how the universe organizes itself, not how particles communicate. It reveals the unity of the substrate, not the behavior of objects. It exposes the memory of the vacuum, not the path of signals. And here lies the most profound shift. If entanglement reflects the unity of the underlying field, then individuality is a surface phenomenon. What we call a particle is merely a localized expression of a deeper identity. What we call a person is a localized expression of a deeper consciousness. What we call an event is a localized expression of a deeper update. Separate forms, shared substrate. Entanglement, then, is not a feature of particles. It is a feature of existence. It is the fingerprint of unity, showing through the cracks of the visible world. A glimpse of the deeper logic that binds everything into a single unfolding. As this realization anchors itself, the next chapter begins to glow at the horizon, a chapter where time no longer flows in one direction, where cause no longer precedes effect, and where the universe begins to reflect not just spatial unity, but temporal unity as well. A realm where time becomes a mirror, and the universe shows that its logic is not written in sequences, but in symmetry. The deeper logic of entanglement reveals unity beneath space, but unity in space is only half the truth. The other half, the one the universe hides more carefully, is unity in time. For if distance is not fundamental, then sequence may not be either. The familiar order of before and after, cause and effect, movement and consequence, may be nothing more than a surface arrangement, a convenience for minds that perceive in moments rather than in wholes. And once this possibility enters, even gently, the entire flow of time begins to loosen. Imagine two events, separated not by space, but by time. One unfolds today, the other tomorrow. Classical intuition insists there must be a gap between them, a river of seconds, minutes, hours, through which influence must travel. But the deeper substrate does not contain this river. To the underlying field, all moments exist the way all points in space exist, as patterns in a single, coherent structure. If the substrate can update spatially as a whole, why not temporally? This question has hovered for decades at the edge of quantum theory, whispered through experiments that seemed too delicate, too strange, too uncomfortable to fully embrace. Experiments where choices made in the present appear to influence how particles behaved in the past. Experiments where outcomes depend not merely on what happened, but on what will happen. Experiments where the arrow of time seems to bend until it touches itself. These are not fantasies, they are data. In the delayed choice experiments, inspired by John Wheeler, a particle passing through a set of slits behaves as though it knows whether you will choose to observe it, even if the choice is made after it has passed the slits. It acts like a wave if you do not observe. It acts like a particle if you do. And somehow, impossibly, the particle's past behavior aligns with your future decision, as though time were not a line but a mirror, as though past and future touch at the glass. This is not retrocausality in the classical sense. No signal travels backward, no message crosses centuries. It is the deeper substrate, revealing the same principle we saw in entanglement: unity beneath the surface, indivisibility beneath the illusion. The visible world separates moments. The underlying world holds them together, just as entangled particles reveal the same identity across space. Delayed choice experiments reveal the same identity across time. The universe does not update two events, it updates one configuration, expressed in two temporal locations. To the substrate, the future and the past are not far apart. They are adjacent. They are reflections. The entire timeline is a single structure. Collapse selects from it. The observer experiences the selection as flow. This is why retrocausal interpretations, though unsettling, keep resurfacing in the edges of physics. They do not contradict the quantum world, they illuminate it. They show that the substrate does not generate time. Time is a rendering of how updates unfold across the visible layer. In this rendering, sequences appear natural. In the depth, sequences do not bind. They are optional. They are expressive. They are the way consciousness experiences the unfolding, not the way the unfolding occurs. This can be seen in the mathematics of quantum theory, where the wave function evolves symmetrically in both temporal directions. Nothing in the deep equations demands a forward arrow. The arrow of time emerges only when collapse, the selection of a single outcome, breaks the symmetry. And collapse itself is not a process in time, but the mechanism that creates the perception of time. When a wave function collapses, it does not choose a future, it chooses a slice of the entire timeline to reveal. Past and future become consistent with that slice. Reality rearranges itself to maintain coherence. This is the universe's deeper logic. Not that the future affects the past, but that the underlying field expresses both as one. Time becomes a mirror because the substrate reflects the entire configuration at once. Your mind marches through it, one frame at a time, but the field does not march. It simply exists. This possibility becomes clearer when we consider global correlations that span not just distance, but entire histories. Cosmic microwave background fluctuations echo quantum conditions from the earliest moments of the universe, yet modern experiments still produce patterns consistent with those ancient correlations. It is as though the vacuum does not remember a past event, it remembers the entire timeline. The vacuum's memory is not temporal, it is structural, and structural memory does not fade with time because it does not depend on time. It depends on coherence, and coherence belongs to the substrate. This is why particles separated by billions of years still obey quantum statistics. They are not obeying old instructions. They are participating in a timeless structure. The present does not inherit the past. Both emerge from the same underlying selection. And this is why the speed of light no longer seems like a meaningful boundary. Light restricts how quickly one event on the surface can influence another. But influence itself is a surface concept. Beneath the surface, events do not influence, they cohere. Coherence binds moment to moment the same way it binds point to point. The substrate does not distinguish between space and time. It only distinguishes between patterns. This blurring begins to show up in theories like the Wheeler-Feynman absorber theory, where radiation is treated not as a process unfolding forward in time, but as the interplay of waves traveling both forward and backward, canceling and reinforcing each other to create the illusion of temporal flow. The universe, in that picture, is not evolving, it is resonating. Past and future are not separate, they are harmonic, different sides of the same trembling pattern. If this is true, and increasing evidence suggests that it is, then thought itself acquires a new dimension. If the substrate holds entire timelines as coexisting structures, then consciousness, which arises from patterns in that substrate, may not be as bound to linear time as the brain is. This might be why intuition can feel instantaneous, why memory can reshape itself without signals, why insight arrives like a flash, sudden, complete, untraveled. A thought does not flow from past to future. A thought emerges from the timeless structure beneath both. And as this perspective deepens, another realization gathers at the edges of awareness. If time can mirror itself, if the past and future can converge in the same substrate, then causality is not the engine of the universe. Causality is the shadow the update casts on the surface. In the depth, there is no cause and effect. There is only coherence and revelation. And as the coherence continues to broaden, a new horizon begins to form the threshold of the next chapter, where the substrate itself reveals a paradox so delicate that it has eluded physics for nearly a century. A paradox in which nothing truly moves forward, nothing truly moves back, and the universe shows that the illusion of flow is only the beginning of its strangeness. The next step waits, where time folds into itself and speed loses all meaning. The bending of time into a mirror reveals a universe that does not flow but unfolds. Yet if time is not fundamental, if sequences arise only from the way consciousness experiences collapse, then another question begins to gather in the quiet. What was the universe before speed existed? Before light? Before motion? Before every path traced its way across the surface of space-time? To imagine such a universe, you must first remove the most familiar layer, space-time itself. Strip away the fabric that defines distance. Dissolve the rhythm that defines duration. Let the grid of geometry fall into the trembling vacuum beneath it. What remains is not emptiness, but structure. Not darkness, but possibility. A universe without speed is not a universe without activity. It is a universe without distance for activity to traverse. A universe that does not wait, because waiting has no meaning. A universe that does not move, because movement has no opposite. A universe in which everything that could be already exists as pattern within the substrate. This universe is not ancient, it is timeless. Before speed, reality was a single, undivided field in perfect coherence. No parts, no directions, no forces, no clocks. A stillness that was not the absence of motion but the absence of separation. Every potential existed together, every pattern interlocked. Every possibility shimmered inside the same seamless identity. It was not the universe before the Big Bang. It was the universe before existed. Physicists call aspects of this domain the pre-geometric phase, a region where the mathematics of spacetime breaks down and only the raw informational structure remains. Not fields floating in a vacuum, but logic woven into a substrate beyond geometry. No up or down, no left or right, no near or far. Only relationship patterns entangled with patterns, possibilities humming through the vacuum. In this state, the universe did not evolve. It selected, collapse, had not yet carved time into sequences. Light had not yet defined speed. Space had not yet stretched into dimension. Everything existed as a single, omnipresent, now a configuration of pure potential. Then something happened. Not an explosion, not a birth, not a breaking of silence, but a shift in the substrate itself. A transition where coherence began to fracture into distinct regions of possibility. A symmetry broke. The unity that held all patterns in perfect simultaneity reconfigured itself into a structure where patterns could no longer reveal themselves everywhere at once. Constraints emerged, constraints that later became the laws of motion, the arrow of time, the speed of light. Speed was not imposed. Speed was permitted. As a side effect of symmetry breaking, as a surface rule layered atop the deeper field. Before speed, information existed everywhere because everything was one. After speed, information had to reveal itself through the visible layers, one region at a time. Light became the pace of the rendered world. Space became the scaffold that held visibility together. Time became the sequencing of updates into a narrative consciousness could experience. None of these were fundamental. All of them were emergent. In the pre-speed universe, a single update defined all existence. After speed, updates differentiated into many. But differentiation did not erase the unity beneath. Entanglement survives as a reminder. Collapse survives as a reminder. The vacuum's memory survives as a reminder. All of them hint at the original condition, the universe before speed, where coherence was absolute and information did not travel because travel itself did not exist. Even now, fragments of that primordial unity are visible in the Planck-scale foam where space-time dissolves, in the holographic boundary where space is stored like data on a cosmic screen, in the black hole information paradox where the universe refuses to let information be lost because the substrate that contains it cannot be broken. In the strange fact that the universe expands faster than light can keep up, yet nothing violates relativity because the expansion is not motion, it is geometry rewriting itself. These phenomena are fossils of the pre-speed universe, quiet, persistent echoes of a time when the universe did not yet know how to move. To glimpse this deeper state, imagine the cosmos as a sheet of water again. But this time, imagine the sheet before ripples, before waves, before disturbances, perfect stillness, no crests, no troughs, no directions. Every point is indistinguishable from every other. The water does not flow because flow requires asymmetry. Then imagine the first ripple, not a wave, not movement, but a differentiation, a choice within the substrate, a shift in the underlying field that breaks the symmetry and creates the first tension, the first potential for direction. From this tension, the rules of space-time unfold. The universe learns how to express motion. It learns how to express difference. It learns how to render itself through light. But the stillness beneath the ripple persists. It remains the foundation. It remains the true identity. Every structure you see, galaxies spinning, atoms vibrating, neurons firing, is a ripple on the surface. Beneath the ripple is the stillness of the pre-speed universe, untouched. And the most astonishing truth is this, that stillness is not in the past. It is here, now, everywhere. It lies beneath every moment the way the substrate lies beneath every collapse, every entanglement, every revelation. You are walking through a universe built on ancient stillness, a universe that pretends to move so consciousness can experience motion, the speed of light, the flow of time, the expansion of space. All of it is the illusion required for beings who perceive through surfaces. But the deeper layer still holds the unity, the coherence, the silence of the pre-speed state. This silence is not empty. It is potential. It is memory. It is the architecture of all that will ever be. And as the next chapter begins to brighten at the edge of this unfolding, the universe starts to reveal how its stillness shapes the motion we believe in, how movement dissolves when you look too closely, how the core beneath all motion is quiet, and how the silence beneath the world tells a truth the surface cannot admit. Nothing truly moves. Everything only changes. The idea that nothing truly moves begins as a whisper, but once it enters your awareness, it refuses to leave. It settles behind every thought, every memory, every observation of the world, because motion, once examined closely, begins to dissolve the way mist dissolves in the first warmth of dawn. What remains is not emptiness, but a deeper structure, a structure held together by a stillness so complete that movement becomes a kind of illusion drawn across its surface. To see this still core, imagine any object you know, a stone, a leaf, the light of a star burning through a distant night. You believe these things move, that they occupy positions in space and travel from place to place. But beneath this belief lies a truth so quiet that even the laws you were taught struggle to articulate it. Nothing occupies a location, nothing travels between locations, because location itself is a rendering, not a foundation. Every position is a pattern in the underlying field. Every trajectory is a sequence of patterns. Every motion is the surface translation of deeper updates. A planet does not swing around its star the way a bead slides on a wire. The field that expresses the planet simply reconfigures its relationship to the field that expresses the star. The surface world interprets this reconfiguration as motion. This reinterpretation begins gently, hidden in the mathematics of quantum theory, where particles vanish from one location and appear in another without crossing the space between. Tunneling, it is called. But tunneling is merely a hint, a faint, shimmering evidence that the substrate does not care for intermediate states. It reveals only the configurations that matter to the update. Between those configurations lies no motion, only possibility. Even classical physics, when stripped down to its foundations, reveals the same principle. Feynman's path integral approach shows that a particle does not choose a path, it explores all paths. Every route from one point to another is a possibility, a ghostly thread woven through the substrate. Only when the update occurs does one path emerge as the observed reality. And what is chosen is not a traversal, but a selection. The still core beneath motion does not move objects from place to place. It reveals states from possibility to actuality. It updates identity, not position. And this becomes even clearer when you look deeply at the expansion of the universe. Galaxies appear to rush away from one another, carried outward by the stretching of spacetime. But stretching is not motion. The galaxies are not traveling. The metric itself, the geometry of space, updates into a configuration where distances increase. Nothing moves outward. Everything becomes farther. This is the universe's quiet trick. Motion is not something the universe does. Motion is something the surface perceives. The deeper substrate, the bedrock beneath all forms, is still. Not static, alive with potential, but still in the sense that it does not change by traveling. It changes by unfolding. This unfolding is what your mind experiences as motion, as time, as continuity. But beneath continuity lies discreteness, configurations that arise from the deeper layer, revealed one after another in a sequence. Your consciousness knits into a narrative. The mind constructs motion from stillness, the way it constructs continuity from frames in a film. Even thoughts obey this pattern. You feel them moving, flowing, evolving, but consciousness does not receive thoughts from somewhere else. It does not move from one idea to the next. It experiences the unfolding of deeper configurations in real time, configurations that emerge not from neurons carrying signals, but from the substrate revealing states. Thought does not travel, it arrives, as a full update, all at once. This insight is not mystical. It is embedded in the logic of neural synchronization, in the timing of cortical oscillations, in the way entire networks shift as unified fields rather than as sequences of messages. A thought, like an entangled correlation, is a revelation of structure, not a transition of signals. This is the still core beneath experience. The body moves, but the body is a pattern. The universe appears to flow, but flow is an illusion of the rendering surface. The still core beneath motion is not calm. It is not tranquil. It is not empty. It is dense with potential. A silent sea of unexpressed configurations waiting to be selected. The vacuum's trembling is its pulse. Entanglement is its coherence. Collapse is its spotlight. Consciousness is its witness. The visible world is the dance. The substrate is the stage. And the stage itself never shifts. Yet the most delicate truth is this: the still core does not merely support motion, it shapes it. The rules of the visible world arise from how the substrate chooses to reveal configurations. Light's speed, gravity's weakness, the curvature of spacetime, all are constraints imposed by the rendering, not by the depth. The constraints give motion its character. The depth gives motion its meaning. Without the still core, there would be no illusion of movement, no unfolding narrative for consciousness to inhabit. Motion exists because stillness allows it. This symmetry is subtle but fundamental. Motion expresses stillness. Stillness contains motion. They are not opposites. They are reflections. To see this clearly, imagine the universe once more as an immense mandala. With each update to the substrate, a new pattern appears on the surface. To a mind that experiences only the surface, the pattern appears to rotate, to spiral, to drift. But beneath the mandala, nothing rotates, nothing spirals, nothing drifts. The deeper structure simply shifts to reveal new configurations. Motion is the illusion created when timelessness reveals itself in sequence. And that sequence, the one your consciousness rides like a river, does not belong to space or time. It belongs to the substrate. It is within this substrate that the next transformation begins, where the visible world starts to simplify into maps, where distances lose meaning, where shapes flatten into relationships, and where the universe whispers its next truth. Space is not a container, but a projection, and the map beneath it has no distances at all. That map waits in the next chapter, where the universe reveals that it never needed space to begin with. The stillness beneath motion opens a new door, one that is more unsettling than anything that came before. Because if motion dissolves under close inspection, then the stage on which motion appears must dissolve as well. Space, that vast expanse we take for granted, begins to reveal its true nature. Not a container, not a physical expanse, but a map, a projection, a rendering drawn from a deeper geometry where distance does not exist. The cracks in space become visible the moment you stop taking it literally. Quantum tunneling, non-local collapse, entanglement, vacuum memory. These are not quirks or exceptions. They are the fingerprints of something beneath spacetime, something that refuses to play by the rules of geometry. To see this clearly, imagine space as a sheet stretched across a deeper ocean. On the sheet, events seem far apart, scattered, isolated. But beneath the sheet lies a single continuous field. The sheet records only the surface of the field, not its depth. It places events into different coordinates, different places, even if the substrate holding them is unified. Space flattens unity into separation. The deeper substrate, the ocean beneath the sheet, is the real architecture. It contains no distances. It contains only relationships, how patterns affect one another, how updates ripple through its structure, how identity is distributed across forms that appear separate. These relationships are not measured in meters or kilometers. They are measured in coherence, in shared identity, in structural adjacency that ignores physical distance. Two events that appear wildly separated on the surface may lie next to each other in the substrate. Two events that appear close may be vast apart in the deeper geometry. The visible world is a distorted projection, a useful one, but not a truthful one. This distortion becomes clearest in the mathematics of holography. In certain models of the universe, the three-dimensional world is encoded on a distant boundary, a thin sheet of information storing the entire interior. A star burning billions of light years away, the memories in your mind, the quantum fluctuations in the vacuum, all of them may be written in 2 dimensions, projected into 3 the way a shadow projects into shape. Distance, in this view, is not real. It is a calculation performed by the projection, a rule for arranging information in the visible world. And the projection follows rules that the substrate does not: light speed, curvature, geometry, expansion. All of these arise from the map, not the territory. The substrate does not need space to place events. It does not need distance to separate them. It does not need direction to relate them. It only needs the structure of information, the logic through which reality updates. This is why entanglement does not decay with distance. Distance belongs to the map, not the substrate. This is why collapse occurs everywhere at once. Collapse is a change in the substrate, not the surface. This is why nothing truly moves. Movement is the surface interpretation of deeper configurations shifting beneath it. Look closely enough at space, and it falls apart. Look beneath it, and something far more coherent emerges. Imagine a spiderweb, an intricate network of nodes and threads. Now imagine projecting that web onto a wall. The distances between nodes change. Shapes distort, angles warp, but the underlying web remains unchanged. Space is the projection, the substrate is the web, and the universe has always been the web. Physics brushes against this truth in the study of quantum fields, where every point in space-time contains the full structure of the fields that define matter. The fields are not stored in space. Space emerges from them. The vacuum is not housed in space-time. Space-time is carved from the vacuum. Even gravity begins to unravel here. In certain models, gravity is not a force or curvature, but an entropic emergent phenomenon, a statistical effect of information rearranging itself in the substrate. Objects move downhill, not because of force, but because the map updates to lower informational tension. The map changes as the substrate changes, but the substrate never moves. This distinction becomes the heartbeat of the entire story. Movement is a feature of the map. Stillness is the truth of the substrate. Distance is a property of the map. Coherence is the truth of the substrate. Time is the ordering of the map. Update is the truth of the substrate. And this brings us to a subtle but profound shift. Once you see the universe as a projection, you begin to realize that the surface is not lying, it is communicating. The distortions of space are telling you something about the hidden geometry beneath. They are giving you hints about the relationships encoded in the substrate. The bending of light near massive objects tells you how information is distributed. The expansion of the universe tells you how the boundary conditions update. The fixed speed of light tells you the refresh rate of the projection. Entanglement tells you the substrate is non-local. Collapse tells you updates are global, not sequential. The vacuum tells you memory is everywhere. Consciousness tells you the rendering responds to awareness. All of it points to the same conclusion. Space is not the arena where reality unfolds. Space is the language the universe uses to describe its deeper unfolding. And once that language becomes transparent, another realization rises, like a soft tide beneath thought. If the map can project shapes without distances, then the visible world may not be the highest dimension of truth. It may be a shadow, a surface chosen not for accuracy, but for comprehension. The deeper truth waits in the next chapter, a chapter where the illusion of distances gives way to an even quieter paradox, a universe where nothing truly changes place, yet everything transforms. A universe where motion collapses into stillness, and stillness becomes the engine of reality itself. The more the map of space dissolves into the substrate beneath it, the more the idea of speed itself begins to unravel, not gradually, but with a quiet, unavoidable clarity. Because once distance loses meaning, speed, the change of position over time, becomes something impossible to define. A relic from the surface world, meaningful only to a mind that believes in separation. Yet the visible universe clings to speed with remarkable insistence. Light has its famous limit. Particles accelerate and decelerate. Galaxies drift apart as though they are racing through a cosmic sea. Signals travel. Waves propagate. Motion unfolds like a story written frame by frame. But all of this exists only in the rendering, not in the substrate. The substrate does not contain distances, so nothing can cross them. The substrate does not contain time, so nothing can outpace it. The substrate does not contain velocity, so nothing can break it. And here lies the final paradox of speed. Speed exists only in the layer of reality where nothing fundamental happens. Speed governs the illusion, not the cause. Speed measures the rendering, not the update. Speed limits what appears to move, not what exists beneath appearance. To see this paradox fully, imagine the universe as a film projected onto a vast screen. On the screen, characters move at measurable speeds. They run, leap, collide, drift, but the film does not contain motion. The film contains frames. The projector reveals each frame in sequence. Speed is the relationship between frames, not a property of the film. If the projector chooses to show frames faster, the characters move quickly. If the projector slows down, the characters crawl. If the projector freezes, they become still. But the film, the substrate, contains no motion at all. This is the universe's hidden truth. Spacetime is the screen. Geometry is the projection. Light speed is the frame rate. But the substrate that updates the universe is the film, static, omnipresent, timeless. What you perceive as speed is simply the rate at which your consciousness walks through the updates. This paradox becomes even clearer when you examine quantum systems closely. A particle can appear at one location, then appear at another, without passing through the space between. It is not moving, it is selecting. The substrate shifts which configuration becomes visible. Motion is the story consciousness tells to make sense of the change. Even classical objects obey a deeper rule. A planet does not move through space. Space-time rearranges itself so the planet appears at successive coordinates. The speed of the planet is a description of how the rendering changes, not how the substrate acts. Speed is the pace of the illusion, not the pace of reality. And yet, the paradox deepens further, because if speed belongs to the surface, not the substrate, Then what does it limit? What does the speed of light truly constrain? Not information, not causality, not the update beneath everything. Light constrains the rendering of change, the rate at which the visible world can display a new configuration. It is not the maximum speed of cause, it is the maximum speed of appearance. This distinction changes everything. It explains why entanglement is instantaneous, the substrate updates as a whole. It explains why collapse has no propagation. Collapse is not a spatial effect. It explains why the vacuum stores memory. Memory is part of the substrate, not spacetime. It explains why consciousness can feel faster than neurons. Awareness rides the update, not the chemistry. Most paradoxes in physics arise because we confuse the rendering with the substrate. We expect the surface rules to govern the depth. We expect geometry to govern identity. We expect speed to govern revelation. But the substrate does not obey spacetime. Spacetime obeys the substrate. This is why no experiment has ever detected information traveling faster than light. Nothing travels. Information does not move. Information reveals. And yet the rendering insists on the illusion of motion. It must. Without motion, consciousness cannot experience the world as unfolding. It cannot inhabit time. It cannot localize itself. It cannot choose. The visible universe requires speed so the mind can narrate the update. But the deeper universe requires no speed at all. This paradox of dual layers, stillness in depth, motion on the surface, becomes more visible in extreme conditions. Near the event horizon of a black hole, for instance, speed becomes distorted. A falling object appears to slow, stretch, freeze. But the object itself experiences no such boundary. It moves smoothly, unimpeded. The contradiction arises because space-time is warping its own rendering, distorting how updates appear to different observers. The substrate beneath remains unchanged. Or consider cosmic inflation, when the early universe expanded faster than the speed of light by orders of magnitude. This did not violate relativity, because nothing traveled, the rendering expanded. The substrate updated globally. Speed was never the engine. Speed was the shadow. In the holographic picture, this paradox sharpens even further. The entire visible universe may be encoded on a distant boundary, a two-dimensional surface, storing the patterns that are projected inward as three-dimensional reality. If so, speed is not a property of the universe. It is a result of how quickly information can be unpacked from that boundary into the interior rendering. Light speed is the decompression rate of reality. But the substrate, the encoded pattern, contains everything at once. This final paradox is not the end of the story. It is the hinge, the moment where the illusion of speed begins to collapse into the deeper unity that has guided every chapter so far. A unity where time, space, motion, distance, and causality become surface phenomena, features of the rendering, not the source. The next chapter opens upon this unity, a chapter where the story begins to curve back toward its beginning, where the universe returns to the thesis whispered in chapter 1, that information does not obey the rules of the world we see, because information belongs to the world beneath it, a world where speed is not broken but irrelevant. The paradox of speed dissolves. The last illusion that the visible world has been holding on to. Everything that once seemed to move, to signal, to travel, to evolve, begins to soften into a single realization. The universe does not operate through motion. It operates through revelation. Change is not a journey. It is a disclosure. And as this truth settles, a subtle familiarity rises beneath it, a feeling not of discovery, but of remembering. Because the moment you accept that speed governs only the surface, the entire story begins to curve back toward its beginning, toward that first whisper you heard when this journey started. Light is not the fastest thing in the universe, because nothing truly travels. The loop begins to close, not with finality, but with recognition. All the pieces revealed so far, entanglement without distance, collapse without time, vacuum memory, the still substrate beneath motion, the projection of space, they stop behaving like separate ideas. They align. They interlock. They merge into a single unfolding logic, as though the universe were guiding you back to something simple, something you always sensed but could never articulate. The universe does not update parts. It updates wholes. It does not send signals. It reveals states. It does not move information. It transforms structure. And you, moving through this unfolding, begin to understand why the world appears the way it does, why the surface must believe in speed, why consciousness must experience time sequentially, why motion must be rendered as a path instead of a pattern, because without these illusions, the mind could not inhabit the visible layer. It could not anchor itself. It could not know where it is. To live in a universe that updates as a whole, consciousness must be given a map, a story, a sequence, a flow, space, time, motion. These are not lies, but conveniences, forms of translation, interfaces that allow a localized viewpoint to witness a non-local unfolding. This is why the thesis of the first chapter was always more than a provocation. It was an invitation. Light's speed is not the universe's limit. It is the limit of the interface. Beneath it lies the substrate, the field that does not travel, the memory that does not fade, the identity that does not split. A field where the universe exists not as a shape in space, but as a single coherent state, expressed through countless visible forms. And as you return to this realization, a new question emerges, not about information, but about identity. If the universe updates itself as a single whole, then what is the you experiencing this story? Are you a byproduct of the rendering, a localized ripple in the map? Or are you a perspective of the substrate, looking at itself through the lens of the visible world? Every collapse you experience, every thought that forms, every memory that surfaces, they do not arise from an isolated mind. They emerge from the same substrate that updates stars, spins galaxies, and shapes the trembling vacuum. And so your awareness may not be separate from the universe's update. It may be part of it. A local aperture in a global process. A window where the substrate looks upon its own unfolding. This is why the return feels inevitable. Because the deeper you move into the logic of the universe, the more the boundary between observer and observed begins to fade. The laws that govern atoms and the principles that govern awareness begin to mirror one another. Thought does not travel. Entanglement does not travel. Collapse does not travel. Update does not travel. Because nothing travels, everything reveals. And in that revelation, your place in the universe shifts. You are not watching the update. You are participating in it. Your awareness, your sense of now, your quiet presence, these are not incidental. They are woven into the unfolding the same way space-time is, woven into the projection. The surface story places you in a body moving through a world. The deeper story places you in a field, updating itself everywhere, all at once. This is the moment where the return begins, not by closing the circle, but by widening it, by showing that the first whisper of speed was never about physics alone. It was about perception. It was about how the universe hides its deeper unity beneath the familiar rhythm of the visible world. The next chapter, the final one, does not conclude this truth. It distills it. It softens it into something the mind can hold even as it slips into sleep. A final quiet reminder that beneath every movement, every thought, every flicker of light, lies a stillness untouched by time. A stillness that has been waiting since the first whisper and will wait long after the last. As the return settles into place, the universe grows quiet again. Not silent, but calm in the way a deep ocean becomes calm when the wind pauses. After following the threads beneath space and time, after watching motion dissolve, after feeling the map collapse into the substrate beneath it, one truth remains, with a clarity that is almost tender. What we call information has never gone anywhere. It has only ever changed its form. The visible world, with its distances, its speeds, its glowing webs of galaxies stretching into vastness, is a story written on the surface of something immeasurably more complete. A translation of deeper coherence into the language of experience. A rendering, not a root. And the substrate that holds this rendering together does not rush. It does not push. It does not chase its own unfolding. It contains everything it needs at once, the way a seed contains an entire tree before the first leaf appears. In that deeper architecture, no signal travels, because nothing is separate. No update moves, because nothing is isolated. No thought crosses a distance, because thought is not a journey. It is a revelation. Every entangled pulse, every collapse of possibility into presence, every flicker of awareness in a living mind, all of it arises from the same quiet field, the field that does not change by motion, but by becoming. And this becoming is the faint signal beneath the world, a signal that never travels because travel belongs to the surface, a signal that never begins because beginning belongs to time, a signal that never ends because ending belongs to sequence. On the surface, light moves, matter flows, time marches, speed seems to sculpt the rhythm of existence. But beneath the rendering, beneath the shifting pixels of the visible universe, there lies a structure without edges or intervals, a structure where everything that can be revealed already rests in coherence, waiting only for the unfolding that the mind will later call experience. Perhaps this is why awareness feels both small and immeasurable. Small, because the surface shows it confined to a body. Immeasurable, because the depth shows it as part of the same field that updates galaxies. You are not watching the universe from the outside. You are watching it from within the unfolding, a localized window where the substrate reveals itself in a sequence you can follow. The faint signal that never travels moves through you as well. Not by distance, but by identity. Not by speed, but by presence. Every moment of insight, every quiet intuition, every shift of perception is shaped by the same logic that governs the collapse of stars and the trembling of particles. There is no separation between the physics of the world and the experience of being in it. Both are expressions of the same hidden field. This is not a conclusion. The universe does not give conclusions. It gives openings. And this final chapter is not an ending. It is a doorway, a gentle one, barely lit into the understanding that the cosmos is not something you observe, but something you participate in. The faint signal beneath everything will continue. It will unfold. It will reveal. It will write the next configuration of existence long after this moment fades from memory. And though no message travels to meet you, you are always touching the place where every message begins. The quiet substrate beneath the world, the stillness that holds every possibility, the depth where information becomes reality without ever needing to move. If you listen closely enough, you might feel that stillness gathering around you now, soft, patient, unhurried, as though the universe is pausing for an instant before revealing whatever comes next.